Welcome to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. You know, the two most common topics I see discussed on social media as far as Christianity goes are the Nephilim and the idea that there are books banned from the Bible, like this great mystery. Well, you got to understand, most people nowadays, no offense, get their theology from the Da Vinci Code movie more than they do real church history. So today we're going to crack this egg open and really discover if there are books banned from the Bible and why. The great mystery of banned books. Now, there are many books not contained in modern versions of the Bible, known to us today as Apocrypha, for example. But why aren't they there? Were they banned? Were they kept secret? First, let's talk about the varieties of books we're talking about. In a given Protestant Bible today, you're going to find about 66 books, Old Testament and New Testament. In a Roman Catholic Bible, you're going to find 72, 73 books. These are referred to in the Catholic Bible as the deuterocanonical text, or books from the second canon. Now, the first canon was organized by Jerome in the year 381-382 after the Second Ecumenical Church Council, which took place in Constantinople. It was called the First Council of Constantinople. At the time, the Vetus Latina was transformed into the Latin Vulgate, and it wasn't really controversial. The books in most common use were authorized. It would not be until almost 1,000 years later that any books of the Bible were printed in any mass way. The common books were pretty well agreed upon for the New Testament. To understand how we ended up with secret or banned books that may belong to the Bible, we have to go back to the 3rd century BC during the time of Greek rule in Egypt. The king at the time was Ptolemy II, right? And he invited over 70 Hebrew scholars to Egypt to translate their Hebrew scriptures into Greek copy. Upon completion, the Greek Septuagint was born. It contained all the books of the Christian Old Testament, or what would become the Christian Old Testament, but it also included other scriptures called the books of Tobit, Judith, an expanded version of Esther, Wisdom of Solomon, Ecclesiasticus, also known as Sirach, Baruch, who was an assistant of Jeremiah the prophet, Letter from Jeremiah, an expanded version of the book of Daniel with the prayer of Azariah, and Susanna and Bel and the dragon, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, and Esdras. Now, during the 2nd century AD, let me make the distinction here. We had a guy named Dionysius Exiguus who worked in Rome during the middle of the 1st millennium, right? And so what he did is he set up a new dating system. Anything the year 0 or prior goes back in time, BC, before Christ. Anything 0 coming to the present, AD, after death. So when we're talking about the Greek Septuagint, 3rd century BC, we're talking about the 200s BC, 200 years before 0. Now we're talking about the 200s AD, okay? So just to hold on to that. Now, during the 2nd century AD, Christianity was gaining in popularity, and they were using the Jewish scriptures. Friends, when Paul writes to Timothy and talks about the things that Scripture is useful for, he's not talking about a 66-book Bible or a New Testament. It's too early. He's talking about the Hebrew Scriptures and maybe a few letters that had circulated at the time. Those are the scriptures that they were using at the time. Anyway, Christianity was gaining in popularity. They were using the Jewish scriptures. During the time of Paul, historians note that there were 14 synagogues in Rome alone that catered to Jewish converts to Judaism and Christianity. Fascinating. Anyway, Christianity's gaining popularity. So the rabbinic experts of the time got together, revisited all the original Hebrew manuscripts, confirmed the sources and provenance. They kept all the books we know as Old Testament because they had original Hebrew text. But they threw out the extra books we just named, the Apocrypha, because at the time there were no Hebrew originals known to the scholars. During the 4th century, Jerome, 381-382, agreed on 27 books for the New Testament and agreed on the Greek Septuagint version for the Old Testament. Did you catch that? Remember, the Septuagint was made in the 3rd century BC, included all the Apocrypha, the books that the 2nd century AD rabbis threw out. They were part of the original Christian canon of the Old Testament. Now, this does not even consider other extra biblical books referenced in the Bible itself, such as Enoch, Jubilees, Jasher. Some people may be surprised to find out today that various combinations of all these books exist as part of the Christian canon already in various Orthodox churches all over the world. In Ethiopia, they have Enoch, Jasher, Jubilee. The Coptic Church, Oriental Orthodox, Persian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, just to name a few. So what's the mystery? Why don't we all have them? The Protestant Reformation is the answer. You see, they went back to the 2nd century AD and they looked at the books that the Hebrew scholars had thrown out, because there were no Greek originals at the time. And they decided to get rid of what they called Catholic forgeries. So that's the Protestant harsh version. These are Catholic forgeries. But maybe it was more innocent than that. Remember, characters like Desiderius Erasmus of Rotterdam. He retranslated the Latin, and then he put a column beside it of translated Koine Greek. Where did he get it? 1453, Constantinople falls. And all of a sudden, Koine Greek manuscripts of the New Testament are making their way into the universities of Western Europe. So all these early reform-minded people who were Catholic priests themselves were writing to their colleagues and saying, we've got some translation problems here. So you have to decide if you believe it was a conspiracy of the big bad Catholic Church to hide it, or just the fact that the Catholic Church was so big and powerful and had built 1,000 years of doctrines and rituals on some things that were based on mistranslations, and they wasn't going to change them. That's the bottom line. But anyway, so the 1611 King James Version of the Bible, a Protestant Bible in many ways, an Anglican Bible, the first Bible of the Church of England. It did contain the Apocrypha. They put it in a section between the Old and the New Testaments. Now, by the early 1900s, it was taboo for any Protestant to include what were viewed as devious Catholic additions to the Bible. Then the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the caves at Qumran, and they included versions of the books that had been included in the 3rd century BC Septuagint that the 2nd century AD rabbis had trashed because they didn't know of any Hebrew originals. Now they exist, so it's settled, right? These books are scripture. Not so fast. First of all, remember, only the Protestants were the ones with issues with these books. And one of the 5 main tenets of Protestant Christianity is sola scriptura, the Bible alone. And remember, the Bible's inerrant, infallible, and inspired. So how can later discoveries, even when they're proof, be accepted without admitting that somehow earlier doctrines were either perhaps poorly defined or flat out wrong? This is truth. I know it invokes fear because it touches our worldview, but this is not my story. This is history. Anyone who denies these books of Scripture that were included in the 3rd century BC Septuagint, upheld by the earliest canon of the church in the 380s AD, only abandoned as part of the Reformation just 400 or 500 years ago. If someone argues that, they've got a lot of harsh truths to contend with, because history and archaeology now verify at least some of these books. Now, the apocryphal books are very different in style. Interestingly, like Maccabees, for example, fills in the 430-year gap between the Old and New Testament. Some of these stories are about the exiles to Assyria or Babylon. Nobody is arguing that in the apocryphal books God himself are talking, or that they even, in many cases, with the exception of maybe Enoch, Jubilee, Jashers, that they don't necessarily touch on prophecy of the Son of God, but the books interact with deep theological questions and offer various answers. Where does suffering come from? Are there benefits to being righteous? Is religious tradition good? The book of Tobit, in many ways, for example, was about merging religious, scriptural, and cultural ideas. And until the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls, Tobit was primarily known from Greek and Latin manuscripts, although some scholars had posited a Semitic vorlage behind it. All major translations and interpretations of the book had to be made from Greek. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you of something, because I hear this all the time, and this is something I say to many Protestants that I respect greatly. In some Protestant denominations and confessional faiths leaning in your Baptist type stuff, from evolutions of your Westminster Confession of Faith, Second London Confession, 1689 Baptist Confession, look, you get this view that all you need is the Bible. You don't need anything else. Throw it all away. It's crap. But remember, the claim of Scripture is only that it's sufficient unto salvation, not that it is all we will ever need to know about the depth, beauty, richness, tradition, and heritage and history of our faith. To insist that the Bible alone is sufficient to learn all we need to know about our Christian life is like staring at the square on the side of a building, a 6-inch square, and insisting it's the most beautiful thing one had ever seen, only to take a step back and realize it's a mural that covers the side of the building. Only to step back further and realize that the mural covers an entire city block. Friends, thank you for joining me on this one. Great conversation. I hope you'll check out all these books too. If you're in a position where it's hard for you to call these scripture or claim they're scripture, simply refer to them as church history or ancient history, ancient Christian history. Depending on my audience, I sometimes have to do that. And that's the reality of working this faith on the ground. It's okay. Love you all very much. Please help out if you can. Right now, we do need the help. PayPal.com. The link's in the video description. If you'd consider tithing just a little bit, that would be very helpful. We also have Cash App and Venmo. Visit Amazon.com/author/NicholasGarrett. For books we've written, you can do a merch purchase at our Teespring store. You can become a member. I'm including videos for our members that contain deep, deep stuff that I wouldn't dream of saying in the world of big tech censorship on my regular videos that are free. So you can join as a deacon, an archbishop, or a crusader. Please continue to be on the journey with us. Love you very much. God bless you, and may your work today bear fruit.